Hey class, I wanted to give you a little background information on Othello, our next play. So I thought I'd take a little time to talk about Shakespeare, the structure of the tragedy, and just some background information. So William Shakespeare is known as the greatest writer of English. Born in 1564, died in 1616, and it is believed that he used over 30,000 words, and he had a vocabulary of over 60,000. Now, to add some perspective to this, a 14-year-old in 1950, the average 14-year-old knew about 25,000 words. A 14-year-old in 2000 knew about 10,000 words. All right. So, most of Shakespeare's plays were performed at the Globe Theater. The play that we're going to watch, Othello, takes place at the Globe. The original one burned down in 1613, it was rebuilt in 1614, and a modern reconstruction, which is one that we'll see, was built in 1997 and was 750 feet from the original. The type of people that went to the plays, for those of you who go to concerts and things like that, you probably have wanted to go down into the pit, right? That's the place that's closest to the stage. During Shakespeare's time, the pit was basically for what we would call the ill-happy groundlings, right? Kind of the rowdy bunch. And up here in the galleries, those were reserved for the more affluent people, those that had more money. A lot of Shakespeare's plays, some of them take place in Italy. There's some reference to Italy. And the question, why? Well, in England during this time, once you reached a certain age, you would take what was known as the Grand Tour. And you would tour different parts of Europe, Spain, Italy, and the English were fascinated with Italy. Those that traveled there would come back and tell stories. A lot of the English writers, including Shakespeare, they copied the Italian sonnet form, and of course Rome, right? Rome was a very polarizing place. It had this climate, it provided a great escape, but also Rome represented the seat of the hated Catholic power. So we're talking Renaissance here. So when the transition from a medieval to the Renaissance period, kind of people became more secular, right? There was a movement towards humanism, and kind of a kind of movement away from religion. All right. The language. Most of Shakespeare's plays, noble characters will speak in a blank verse. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. In the lower class, characters speak in prose. In our play, Iago, which most would claim to be the most sinister character in Shakespeare, he speaks in both. Okay, so let's break down the language. So, as I mentioned, Shakespeare used 3 levels of language in his plays. Prose is used, the everyday language. In Shakespeare, it's used by people of lower social status, lower class. The blank verse, this is unrhymed iambic pentameter, and in Shakespeare, it's used frequently by characters of a higher social class. Now, unrhymed iambic pentameter means it's not rhymed, but it's structured. Most often we'll have 10 syllables. Whether it's 10, whether it's 11 or 12, each line will have the same number of symbols, and it sounds more lofty. Right? It makes the characters sound more educated, more important. And of course, most of us are familiar with the rhymed verse. So rhymed iambic pentameter follows the same number of syllables, but most often will have a rhyme at the end. Again, it's used for higher social status, characters that are more important. Here's some examples. So how to identify it? Does the passage rhyme? Was the rhyme scheme AABB? So this is in a reference to the end, and we'll take a look at some examples in a minute. If it doesn't rhyme, you can count the syllables. Right? Are there 10? It's probably iambic pentameter. If it doesn't rhyme and doesn't have 10 syllables, then it's probably prose. All right, let's take a look at this. So this is Romeo to Juliet. If I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle fine as this, my lips to blushing pilgrims ready stand, to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss. This is rhymed verse, right? It has an A, B, A, B. And the A would be hand, the B would be this, and the stand would be A. So notice these two rhyme, right? So this is A, B, A, B. So the B's are going to rhyme this and kiss. So that's rhyme verse. And here's Lord Capulet. Go, Sirrah, trudge about, through fair Verona, find those persons out, whose names are written there, and to them say, my house, and welcome on their pleasures stay. So again, we have rhyme, right? We have A, B, B. This is rhyme verse. And let's take a look at this serving man here. The name should give us a clue, right? Find them out whose names are written here. It is written that the shoemaker should meddle with this. So this is prose, right? So you can tell the difference, I think, when you read it out loud. And let's take a look at this one here. Mercutio. Oh, then, I seek when Mab hath been with you. She is the fairy's midwife, and she comes, in shape no bigger than an agate stone on the forefinger of an alderman. We'll stop there and count some of the syllables. Oh, then I see Queen Mab hath been with you. There's 10. She is the fairy's midwife, and she comes. There's 10. So this is actually iambic blank verse. It doesn't rhyme, but it's still structured. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about the characters. As I mentioned before, Iago is known as Shakespeare's most sinister character, and Othello is known as a Moor. He's Islamic, Arabic, comes from North Africa. Now, this is important because in the 16th and 17th century there were a lot of stereotypes towards Moors, right? They were believed to be deceitful, dishonest, fickle, disloyal, and it was believed that they engaged in black magic. They had a lack of self-control physically, mentally, or emotionally, and tended to be violent and dangerous. So we'll probably talk more about that once we get into the play. A tragedy, where does this come from? I mentioned this previously. Renaissance art focused on humanism, right? It was a departure from the medieval art. Okay. So away from religion and more towards the secular, right? Shakespeare realized the human character in the same way that Michelangelo realized the physical characteristics of humankind. So even 400 years later, we can read or watch this play and basically see a psychopath and I guess basically an alcoholic as well. So pretty amazing stuff. Now, all of Shakespeare's tragedies will contain at least one or more of these elements: a tragic hero, a dichotomy of good and evil. Right? So there's always this war of good and evil. A tragic waste, meaning, what could have been. Right? And our Marcia, so our tragic hero will have some sort of flaw that leads to his downfall. There will be issues of fate or fortune, greed, foul revenge. So there'll be some sort of act of revenge, but the revenge will be unwarranted, right? There'll be a mistake. Supernatural elements, internal and external pressures, especially on this tragic hero, and the paradox of life. We'll probably see this from Iago. And he'll say something, right? He'll say something and he acts the complete opposite of what he says. So that's a little bit about the play. I hope you enjoy it.